Question 1. What factors determine the appropriate integration of regulatory compliance requirements into the incident response lifecycle for a checkpoint-certified security expert? Option A. The current threat landscape and the prevalence of similar attack vectors. Option B. The specific industry sector of the organization, the type of data compromised, and the applicable legal and regulatory frameworks governing data protection and breach notification. Option C. The urgency of restoring affected services and the potential impact on business operations. Option D. The perceived technical complexity of the security incident and the availability of internal security expertise. The correct answer is B. The specific industry sector of the organization, the type of data compromised, and the applicable legal and regulatory frameworks governing data protection and breach notification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security professional to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of regulatory compliance. Misinterpreting or neglecting specific regulatory requirements can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. The pressure to restore services quickly can sometimes overshadow the due diligence required to ensure that the restoration process itself adheres to established security and compliance frameworks. Careful judgment is needed to identify the critical compliance touchpoints within the incident response lifecycle. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically integrates regulatory requirements into the incident response process. Specifically, it prioritizes identifying and documenting all relevant regulatory obligations before implementing remediation steps. This ensures that any actions taken to restore services are not only effective in addressing the immediate security incident, but also compliant with applicable laws and guidelines. This proactive integration minimizes the risk of post-incident audits revealing non-compliance, thereby safeguarding the organization. This aligns with the principles of a robust security program that embeds compliance into operational workflows, as often mandated by regulatory frameworks that require demonstrable adherence to security standards and incident handling procedures. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach fails by focusing solely on the technical aspects of incident containment and eradication, without considering the regulatory implications of data handling or system access during the response. This can lead to violations of data privacy laws, e.g., if sensitive data is accessed or disclosed improperly during containment, or breach notification requirements if the incident impacts regulated data. Another incorrect approach is to assume that standard operating procedures for incident response are inherently compliant without verifying their alignment with current regulatory mandates. Regulations evolve, and relying on outdated or generic procedures can result in non-compliance, especially concerning specific reporting timelines, data retention policies, or the scope of required notifications. A third incorrect approach involves delaying the formal documentation of the incident and response actions until after all remediation is complete. This can be problematic as many regulations require timely and accurate record-keeping of security incidents, including the steps taken to address them. Such delays can hinder auditability and demonstrate a lack of due diligence in managing security events, potentially leading to penalties for insufficient oversight or reporting. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach that embeds compliance checks at each stage of the incident response lifecycle. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's regulatory landscape and identifying all applicable compliance obligations related to data security and incident response. 2. Developing and maintaining an incident response plan that explicitly incorporates these regulatory requirements. 3. During an incident, immediately assessing the potential regulatory impact of the event and the planned response actions. 4. Ensuring that all containment, eradication, and recovery activities are conducted in a manner that respects data privacy, notification obligations, and evidence preservation requirements. 5. Prioritizing thorough and timely documentation of all incident-related activities, including evidence of compliance. 6. Conducting post-incident reviews that specifically assess adherence to regulatory mandates and identify areas for improvement in both security posture and compliance processes. Question 2. When evaluating the implementation of network security controls for compliance with the 156-315/77 framework, which approach best ensures both operational effectiveness and adherence to regulatory mandates. Option A. Prioritizing the deployment of the most advanced security technologies available, with the understanding that their mere presence will satisfy compliance obligations. Option B. Conducting a thorough review of security logs and configuration settings to verify that implemented controls actively enforce the specific security policies mandated by the 156-315/77 framework and are functioning as intended. Option C. Confirming that all security appliances and software are installed and running the latest vendor-provided firmware, and that basic security features are enabled by default. Option D. Implementing security controls based on general cybersecurity best practices and industry standards, assuming they will inherently satisfy the 156-315/77 requirements. The correct answer is B. Conducting a thorough review of security logs and configuration settings to verify that implemented controls actively enforce the specific security policies mandated by the 156-315/77 framework and are functioning as intended. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity compliance, balancing operational efficiency with the stringent requirements of regulatory frameworks. The Checkpoint Certified Security Expert (CCSE) certification, particularly with its focus on 156-315/77, implies adherence to specific security best practices and potentially regulatory mandates relevant to network security. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying these mandates to real-world security configurations without compromising either security posture or business continuity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security controls are not merely implemented, but are demonstrably effective and compliant with the spirit and letter of the regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based validation of security controls against the defined regulatory requirements. This involves not just checking if a control is present, but verifying its operational effectiveness and its alignment with the specific mandates of the 156-315/77 framework. This proactive and thorough method ensures that the organization is not only meeting minimum compliance standards, but is also building a robust and resilient security posture, minimizing the risk of breaches and associated penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and a mature security program. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the presence of a security feature without verifying its functionality or its alignment with specific regulatory clauses fails to meet the core objective of compliance. This is a regulatory failure because it implies a superficial understanding of the requirements, leading to a false sense of security and potential noncompliance. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold professional responsibility to protect organizational assets and data. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, such as relying on vendor default configurations without proper review, is also a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Vendor defaults may not align with specific organizational needs or the detailed requirements of the 156-315/77 framework, leading to security gaps. This haste bypasses critical validation steps, increasing the risk of misconfigurations that could be exploited. A third incorrect approach that involves implementing controls based on general industry best practices without direct mapping to the specific regulatory framework is problematic. While industry best practices are valuable, they are not a substitute for understanding and adhering to the explicit mandates of the 156-315/77. This can lead to a situation where controls are in place but do not satisfy the precise legal or regulatory obligations, creating a compliance deficit. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory requirements of the 156-315/77 framework. Second, map these requirements to the organization's existing or planned security controls. Third, develop a testing and validation methodology to confirm that each control is not only implemented, but is also functioning as intended and meeting the specific compliance criteria. Finally, maintain comprehensive documentation of this process to demonstrate due diligence and facilitate future audits. Question 3. The control framework reveals a requirement for robust access control mechanisms to protect sensitive data. A new security solution is proposed that offers advanced features and is widely adopted by industry peers. However, its direct mapping to the specific control objectives and implementation guidance within the 156-315/77 regulatory framework is not immediately clear. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with the regulatory framework? Option A. Implement the proposed solution immediately due to its advanced features and industry adoption, assuming it will inherently satisfy the regulatory requirements. Option B. Prioritize the most cost-effective solution that offers a basic level of access control, even if its alignment with the specific nuances of the 156-315/77 framework is not fully verified. Option C. Deploy the proposed solution and rely on the vendor's assurance that it meets all relevant compliance standards without independent verification against the 156-315/77 framework. Option D. Thoroughly analyze the proposed solution's capabilities against the specific control objectives and implementation guidance of the 156-315/77 framework, ensuring it meets all documented requirements and can be effectively monitored and validated. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly analyze the proposed solution's capabilities against the specific control objectives and implementation guidance of the 156-315/77 framework, ensuring it meets all documented requirements and can be effectively monitored and validated. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity compliance, balancing the need for robust security controls with the practicalities of business operations and the interpretation of regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of the specified regulatory framework, 156-315/77 Checkpoint Certified Security Expert, implying a focus on U.S. federal regulations, likely NIST SB 800-53 or similar, and applying its principles to a specific technical control. Misinterpreting or misapplying these controls can lead to significant compliance gaps, security vulnerabilities, and potential penalties. The pressure to implement controls quickly without fully understanding their implications adds to the professional difficulty. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific control objectives as defined by the 156-315/77 framework. This means not just implementing a technical solution, but ensuring that the solution directly addresses the intent of the regulation. For regulatory compliance, this typically involves mapping security controls to specific requirements, documenting the implementation, and establishing processes for ongoing monitoring and validation. The correct approach prioritizes a risk-based methodology, ensuring that the implemented control is effective in mitigating identified risks and meets the documented compliance objectives. This aligns with best practices in information security management and regulatory adherence, ensuring that the organization can demonstrate compliance to auditors and regulatory bodies. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a solution solely based on vendor recommendations without verifying its alignment with the specific control objectives of 156-315/77 is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Vendor solutions are designed for broad applicability, but compliance requires tailoring to specific frameworks. This approach risks implementing controls that are technically sound, but do not satisfy the precise requirements of the regulation, leading to a compliance gap. Focusing exclusively on the perceived cost-effectiveness of a solution without a thorough assessment of its security efficacy and compliance alignment is another failure. While cost is a business consideration, it cannot supersede the fundamental requirement to meet regulatory obligations and maintain adequate security. This approach can lead to the adoption of inadequate or ineffective controls, creating a false sense of security and compliance. Adopting a control that is technically complex but lacks clear documentation and operational procedures is also problematic. Regulatory frameworks often require not only the implementation of controls, but also the ability to demonstrate their operation and effectiveness through documented processes and evidence. A lack of documentation hinders auditing and validation, making it impossible to prove compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, they must thoroughly understand the specific requirements of the 156-315/77 framework and the control objectives related to the security function in question. Second, they should evaluate potential solutions against these objectives, considering not only technical capabilities, but also their ability to meet documentation, operational, and validation requirements. Third, a risk assessment should be conducted to ensure the chosen control effectively mitigates identified risks. Finally, all decisions and implementations must be meticulously documented to provide auditable evidence of compliance. This systematic approach ensures that security and compliance are integrated, rather than treated as separate, competing priorities. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal that a critical security vulnerability was identified and patched by the security team within hours, significantly mitigating potential damage. However, the incident response documentation is incomplete, lacking detailed timestamps for all remediation steps and a formal risk assessment report that explicitly links the vulnerability to specific regulatory compliance requirements. Which of the following actions best represents the appropriate professional response to this situation, considering the need for both effective security and regulatory adherence? Option A. Delegate the documentation task to a junior analyst, instructing them to fill in the missing details based on their recollection of the event to expedite the closure of the incident record. Option B. Focus on implementing additional technical controls to prevent future occurrences of similar vulnerabilities, assuming that the successful patch implicitly satisfies any regulatory documentation requirements. Option C. Immediately initiate a post-incident review to meticulously reconstruct the timeline of events, complete all required documentation, and generate a formal risk assessment report that clearly articulates the vulnerability impact on relevant regulatory compliance obligations. Option D. Acknowledge the successful patch and consider the incident closed, as the primary objective of mitigating the threat was achieved, and further documentation is a secondary concern. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a post-incident review to meticulously reconstruct the timeline of events, complete all required documentation, and generate a formal risk assessment report that clearly articulates the vulnerability impact on relevant regulatory compliance obligations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid threat response and the need for thorough, documented compliance with regulatory frameworks. The Checkpoint Certified Security Expert, CCSE, is expected to not only implement technical controls, but also to ensure that these implementations align with established legal and industry standards. The core difficulty lies in balancing operational urgency with the meticulous record-keeping and procedural adherence mandated by regulatory bodies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, documented, and auditable response by adhering to established incident response plans and ensuring all actions are logged and justified against specific security policies and regulatory requirements. The CCSE demonstrates a commitment to both effective security and legal compliance. This proactive documentation ensures that, in the event of an audit or investigation, the organization can prove its adherence to standards, mitigating legal and financial risks. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and accountability expected in cybersecurity roles. An incorrect approach that bypasses established procedures for expediency, even with good intentions, introduces significant regulatory and ethical failures. Such an approach risks creating a black box, where critical security decisions and actions are not transparently recorded or justified. This lack of documentation can lead to non-compliance with regulations that mandate audit trails and evidence of security controls. Ethically, it undermines the principle of accountability and can create a precedent for circumventing established governance, potentially leading to future security lapses or misinterpretations of events. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate technical remediation without considering the broader compliance implications fails to meet the comprehensive requirements of a CCSE. Regulatory frameworks often require not just the resolution of a security incident, but also the analysis of its root cause, the implementation of preventative measures, and the reporting of the incident according to specific guidelines. Ignoring these aspects can result in a superficial fix that leaves the organization vulnerable to repeat attacks and non-compliant with reporting obligations. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response methodology. This includes immediate containment and eradication, followed by thorough investigation and analysis. Crucially, throughout this process, all actions must be meticulously documented, referencing relevant internal policies and external regulatory requirements. The CCSE should always consider the auditability of their actions. If a decision deviates from standard procedure, it must be explicitly justified and approved, with the rationale clearly recorded. This ensures that the response is both effective and defensible from a compliance perspective. Question 5. The performance metrics show a significant slowdown in network traffic processing by the Checkpoint Security Gateway, impacting user productivity. As the Checkpoint certified security expert responsible for maintaining both security posture and operational efficiency, which of the following actions is the most appropriate and compliant response? Option A. Immediately disable the intrusion prevention system IPS and application control blades for all traffic until the performance issue is resolved to restore normal network speeds. Option B. Advise management that the performance degradation is likely due to increased user activity and recommend increasing network bandwidth without further investigation of the security gateway's configuration. Option C. Implement a broad exception rule allowing all traffic to bypass deep packet inspection for a period of 48 hours to alleviate the performance strain. Option D. Conduct a detailed analysis of the security gateway's resource utilization, traffic logs, and security policy configurations to identify specific features or rules causing the performance bottleneck, and then optimize those configurations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed analysis of the security gateway's resource utilization, traffic logs, and security policy configurations to identify specific features or rules causing the performance bottleneck, and then optimize those configurations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity compliance, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational realities of a business. The performance metrics indicating a slowdown directly impact user productivity and potentially revenue, creating pressure to relax security measures. However, the core of the Checkpoint Certified Security Expert (CCSE) role, particularly concerning regulatory compliance, is to uphold security standards without compromising the organization's ability to operate, but never at the expense of regulatory adherence. The challenge lies in identifying solutions that meet both security and performance objectives, rather than making a direct trade-off that violates compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the root cause of the performance degradation, specifically linking it to the implemented security controls. This requires a deep understanding of the Checkpoint Security Gateway's functionalities, logging capabilities, and potential tuning parameters. Best professional practice dictates a systematic, data-driven approach. This includes analyzing traffic logs, identifying specific security policies or features, e.g., IPS, application control, URL filtering, that are consuming excessive resources, and then optimizing these configurations. This might involve fine-tuning signatures, adjusting policy enforcement, or implementing more efficient inspection methods. This approach upholds regulatory compliance by ensuring that security controls remain effective while addressing performance issues through technical expertise and configuration management, rather than by disabling or weakening controls. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling security features or policies outright is a direct violation of regulatory frameworks that mandate specific security controls. For instance, regulations often require intrusion prevention, content filtering, and access control mechanisms. Disabling these without a documented, risk-assessed, and approved exception process is a significant compliance failure. It exposes the organization to known threats, increasing the likelihood of a security incident, which itself can trigger regulatory scrutiny and penalties. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility in managing security infrastructure. Implementing a blanket exception for all traffic, or for specific user groups without a granular analysis of the risk and impact, is also a regulatory failure. Compliance frameworks typically require a risk-based approach to exceptions. A broad exception bypasses the necessary risk assessment and approval processes, essentially creating a security blind spot. It suggests a reactive and irresponsible approach to security management, prioritizing immediate convenience over long-term security posture and regulatory obligations. Ignoring the performance issue and attributing it solely to user error or external factors, without investigating the security gateway's role, is a failure of professional responsibility. As a security expert, the onus is on the individual to identify and address security-related performance bottlenecks. This inaction can lead to a gradual erosion of security posture as users find workarounds, and it prevents the organization from optimizing its security investments. It also fails to address a critical operational issue that, while not directly a security breach, can have significant business implications and may indirectly lead to security vulnerabilities if users become frustrated and bypass controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a structured problem-solving methodology. First, acknowledge the reported performance issue and its potential impact. Second, initiate a detailed investigation into the security gateway's performance metrics and logs, correlating them with the reported slowdown. Third, identify specific security features or policies that are resource-intensive. Fourth, consult documentation and best practices for optimizing these features on the Checkpoint platform. Fifth, propose and implement targeted configuration changes, testing their impact on both performance and security effectiveness. If significant changes are required, follow established change management and risk assessment procedures. Document all findings, actions, and their justifications. This systematic approach ensures that security remains robust, compliance is maintained, and operational efficiency is improved through informed technical solutions. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that a new, highly advanced threat intelligence platform offers significant improvements in real-time threat detection. To integrate this platform, a security team must ensure it aligns with the specific regulatory framework and guidelines relevant to the 156-315 77 Checkpoint Certified Security Expert Certification. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance and effective integration? Option A. Rely solely on the vendor's assurance that the platform is compliant with all relevant security standards, without independent verification or internal testing. Option B. Immediately deploy the platform after a cursory review of vendor marketing materials, assuming its advanced features inherently meet all regulatory needs. Option C. Conduct a thorough gap analysis of the platform's capabilities against the explicit requirements and guidelines of the 156-315 77 jurisdiction, followed by a controlled pilot deployment and comprehensive documentation. Option D. Prioritize the platform's adoption based on its perceived technical superiority, deferring detailed regulatory compliance checks until after initial implementation. Correct answer is B. Immediately deploy the platform after a cursory review of vendor marketing materials, assuming its advanced features inherently meet all regulatory needs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological adoption and the stringent regulatory requirements for data protection and security. Organizations are constantly pressured to leverage new security solutions to stay ahead of evolving threats, but this must be balanced against the need for thorough due diligence and compliance with established frameworks. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the adoption of advanced security technologies does not inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or lead to non-compliance with the specific mandates of the 156-315 77 Checkpoint Certified Security Expert Jurisdiction. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and compliant integration of new security technologies. This involves a comprehensive understanding of the existing regulatory landscape, including the specific requirements and guidelines relevant to the 156-315 77 exams jurisdiction. By conducting a thorough risk assessment, validating the technology against these specific mandates, and ensuring proper documentation and training, professionals uphold their ethical and legal obligations. This proactive and compliant method minimizes the risk of security breaches and regulatory penalties, fostering trust and demonstrating a commitment to robust security posture. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived security benefits of a new technology without rigorous validation against the 156-315 77 framework represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the deployment of solutions that are incompatible with existing security policies, fail to meet audit requirements, or even introduce new compliance gaps. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on vendor claims without independent verification or internal testing, bypasses critical due diligence steps. This not only exposes the organization to potential security risks, but also violates the principle of professional responsibility to ensure the efficacy and compliance of implemented security measures. A third incorrect approach, neglecting proper documentation and training, undermines the long-term effectiveness of the security solution and creates an environment where its proper use and maintenance are compromised, leading to potential operational failures and compliance issues. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory requirements for the 156-315 77 jurisdiction. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the proposed technology's alignment with these requirements, including its impact on existing security controls and data handling practices. A thorough risk assessment, vendor due diligence, and pilot testing are crucial steps. Finally, ensuring comprehensive documentation and training for all relevant personnel solidifies the implementation and promotes ongoing compliance and effective security management. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that to effectively identify and prioritize potential security threats to a checkpoint security environment, the most prudent initial step involves which of the following? Option A. Reviewing theoretical attack methodologies published in academic journals without considering the organization's current security posture. Option B. Analyzing recent threat intelligence feeds specifically tailored to the organization's industry and the specific checkpoint products in use, cross-referenced with internal vulnerability scan results. Option C. Relying solely on generic industry best practices for security without specific analysis of the organization's unique technology stack and threat profile. Option D. Conducting a broad scan of global cyber threat landscapes to identify every conceivable attack vector, regardless of immediate relevance. The correct answer is B. Analyzing recent threat intelligence feeds specifically tailored to the organization's industry and the specific checkpoint products in use, cross-referenced with internal vulnerability scan results. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive data gathering with the practical constraints of time and resources, while adhering to regulatory requirements. The professional must identify the most effective and compliant method for understanding potential threats and vulnerabilities without becoming bogged down in unproductive activities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes actionable intelligence and aligns with the principles of efficient risk management. By focusing on documented vulnerabilities and known threat actors relevant to the organization's specific technology stack and industry, it ensures that the assessment is targeted and provides a solid foundation for mitigation strategies. This aligns with the spirit of regulatory frameworks that mandate a proactive and proportionate approach to security, emphasizing the identification and management of risks that are most likely to impact the organization. An incorrect approach that relies solely on broad, unverified threat intelligence feeds without context fails to provide specific, actionable insights. This is professionally unacceptable as it wastes resources on information that may not be relevant to the organization's unique risk profile, potentially leading to misallocation of security efforts and non-compliance with regulations that expect a tailored risk assessment. Another incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on theoretical attack vectors without considering the organization's current security posture or the likelihood of such attacks is also professionally unsound. This can lead to an overestimation of certain risks and an underestimation of others, resulting in an inefficient and potentially ineffective security strategy. Regulations typically require risk assessments to be based on a realistic evaluation of threats and vulnerabilities, not just hypothetical scenarios. Finally, an approach that neglects to involve key stakeholders, such as IT operations and business unit leaders, during the risk assessment process is a significant professional and ethical failure. This isolationist method can lead to a skewed understanding of risks, overlooking critical business impacts or operational realities. Effective risk management requires collaboration and a shared understanding of threats and their potential consequences, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory guidelines that emphasize a holistic view of organizational security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the scope and objectives of the risk assessment, aligning them with business goals and regulatory requirements. 2. Prioritizing data sources based on relevance, reliability, and potential impact on the organization's specific environment. 3. Engaging relevant stakeholders early and continuously to ensure a comprehensive and accurate understanding of threats, vulnerabilities, and business context. 4. Focusing on identifying actionable risks that can be effectively mitigated, rather than simply cataloging all possible threats. 5. Documenting the assessment process, findings, and justifications thoroughly to demonstrate due diligence and compliance. Question 8. Compliance review shows that the security team has identified a significant number of vulnerabilities across the network. The team is debating how to prioritize remediation efforts. One proposed approach is to focus exclusively on the vulnerabilities that have been discovered most recently, assuming these are the most critical. Another suggestion is to address only those vulnerabilities that have a critical or high severity rating assigned by the vendor, respective of the specific environment. A third approach advocates for tackling vulnerabilities based on the sheer volume of findings, prioritizing those with the highest count, which approach best aligns with a robust and defensible risk assessment methodology for prioritizing security remediation. Option A. Prioritizing remediation based on the total number of identified vulnerabilities, regardless of their specific nature or impact. Option B. Addressing vulnerabilities exclusively based on the vendor's assigned severity rating, without further environmental context. Option C. Focusing remediation efforts solely on vulnerabilities that have been discovered most recently. Option D. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based on a combination of their likelihood of exploitation within the organization's specific environment and the potential business impact if exploited. Correct answer is D. Prioritizing vulnerabilities based on a combination of their likelihood of exploitation within the organization's specific environment and the potential business impact if exploited. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive analysis with the practical constraints of time and resources. The professional's task is to identify and prioritize risks effectively, ensuring that critical vulnerabilities are addressed without getting bogged down in exhaustive, low-impact analysis. The core of the challenge lies in the subjective nature of risk and the need for a structured, defensible methodology. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with established risk management frameworks and regulatory expectations for information security. By focusing on the likelihood and impact of threats to critical assets, it ensures that resources are allocated to the most significant risks. This systematic approach provides a clear rationale for decision-making, which is crucial for audits and demonstrating due diligence. It also fosters a proactive security posture by identifying potential weaknesses before they are exploited. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the number of vulnerabilities identified fails to consider the context and potential impact of each vulnerability. This can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing minor issues while overlooking more severe threats. Ethically, this approach is flawed as it does not demonstrate a commitment to protecting the organization's most valuable assets or sensitive data. It also fails to meet regulatory expectations for a risk-based security program, which mandates prioritization based on potential harm. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on the perceived newness of a vulnerability ignores the fact that older vulnerabilities can still be highly exploitative and dangerous, especially if they are unpatched or widely known. This approach is not grounded in a logical assessment of risk and can leave the organization exposed to well-understood but unmitigated threats. It is a failure of professional judgment and a deviation from best practices in vulnerability management. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities based on the vendor's severity rating alone, without considering the specific environment and its unique threat landscape, is also problematic. While vendor ratings are a useful starting point, they are often generic and do not account for how a vulnerability might be exploited within a particular organization's infrastructure or the specific business impact it could have. This can lead to a false sense of security or an overemphasis on risks that are less relevant to the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment methodology. This typically includes identifying assets, identifying threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing the likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability, assessing the potential impact on the organization, and then determining the overall risk level. This allows for prioritization based on a combination of likelihood and impact, ensuring that the most critical risks are addressed first. Documentation of this process and the rationale behind risk prioritization is essential for accountability and continuous improvement. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of potential threats and vulnerabilities. Considering the Check Point certified security expert, exams focus on risk assessment within a regulatory framework. Which of the following approaches best supports the development of a robust and actionable security strategy? Option A. Prioritize the assessment of critical business processes and the threats and vulnerabilities that could impact them, linking risk to business objectives. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive inventory of all known technical vulnerabilities across the entire IT infrastructure, regardless of business criticality. Option C. Rely primarily on industry best practice checklists and compliance requirements to guide the risk assessment process. Option D. Gather input from IT security staff and a select group of end users to identify perceived risks. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the assessment of critical business processes and the threats and vulnerabilities that could impact them, linking risk to business objectives. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive analysis with the practical constraints of time and resources. The professional must identify the most effective method for understanding potential threats and vulnerabilities without getting bogged down in overly granular or irrelevant details. The core of the challenge lies in selecting an approach that aligns with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations, ensuring that the assessment provides actionable insights for security investments. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, top-down methodology that prioritizes critical assets and business functions. This aligns with best practices in risk management, which advocate for focusing resources where they will have the greatest impact. By identifying critical business processes and then assessing the threats and vulnerabilities that could impact them, the organization can develop a risk profile that is directly tied to business objectives. This approach is professionally sound because it ensures that the risk assessment directly informs strategic security decisions, leading to more efficient allocation of resources and better alignment with regulatory requirements for data protection and operational resilience. It allows for a clear understanding of the potential business impact of security incidents, which is crucial for executive buy-in and resource justification. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on a comprehensive inventory of all possible technical vulnerabilities without a clear link to business impact. This can lead to an overwhelming amount of data that is difficult to prioritize and may not address the most significant risks to the organization. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in identifying and mitigating risks that could lead to data breaches or service disruptions, potentially violating regulations that mandate risk-based security measures. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without a systematic process. This lacks objectivity and can lead to biased assessments, overlooking critical risks or overemphasizing minor ones. Such an approach is professionally deficient as it does not provide a defensible basis for security decisions and could be challenged by auditors or regulators for its lack of rigor. It also fails to meet the ethical obligation to conduct a thorough and impartial assessment. Finally, an approach that solely focuses on compliance checklists without understanding the underlying risks is also flawed. While compliance is important, it should be a byproduct of effective risk management, not the sole driver. Focusing only on checklists can lead to a false sense of security, as an organization might meet the letter of the law but still be exposed to significant risks not explicitly covered by the checklist. This is a regulatory failure because it does not demonstrate a genuine understanding and mitigation of risks, which is the spirit of most security regulations. A professional decision-making process should involve understanding the organization's business objectives, identifying critical assets and processes, and then applying a risk assessment methodology that prioritizes threats and vulnerabilities based on their potential impact. This requires collaboration between IT security, business units, and senior management to ensure that the assessment is comprehensive, relevant, and actionable. Question 10. Compliance review shows a critical vulnerability has been identified in a core network service that supports multiple business-critical applications. The vendor has released a patch, but testing indicates a high probability of service interruption for a significant period if applied during business hours. The security team has assessed the exploitability of the vulnerability as high, with potential for severe data compromise. What is the most appropriate course of action for the security team? Option A. Immediately deploy the patch during a scheduled maintenance window that minimizes operational impact after communicating the plan and potential risks to relevant stakeholders. Option B. Implement a complex, untested workaround to mitigate the vulnerability while awaiting a future, more stable patch. Option C. Delay the patching process indefinitely until a less disruptive solution can be found, prioritizing immediate operational continuity. Option D. Proceed with deploying the patch immediately during business hours to address the critical vulnerability as quickly as possible. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy the patch during a scheduled maintenance window that minimizes operational impact after communicating the plan and potential risks to relevant stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where a critical security vulnerability is discovered, but its immediate remediation could disrupt essential business operations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the imperative of security with the operational continuity requirements of the organization. A hasty or poorly considered decision can lead to either a significant security breach or a crippling operational failure, both of which have severe consequences. The correct approach involves a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, stakeholder consultation, and a phased remediation strategy. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that security decisions are informed, proportionate, and aligned with business objectives. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of due diligence and risk management expected of security professionals. The regulatory framework for this exam, 156-315, 77 Checkpoint Certified Security Expert, implicitly emphasizes a proactive and risk-based approach to security, requiring professionals to make informed decisions that protect assets while minimizing operational impact. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy the patch without considering the potential operational impact. This demonstrates a failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment and a disregard for business continuity, potentially violating organizational policies and best practices for change management. Another incorrect approach is to delay patching indefinitely due to fear of operational disruption, which constitutes a failure to address a known critical vulnerability and exposes the organization to unacceptable risk, directly contravening the fundamental duty to protect information assets. A third incorrect approach is to attempt a complex, untested workaround without proper validation. This introduces new, unknown risks and can be more disruptive than a planned remediation, showcasing a lack of due diligence and potentially violating established IT governance frameworks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Comprehensive risk assessment. Quantify the likelihood and impact of the vulnerability being exploited versus the impact of remediation. 2. Stakeholder engagement. Consult with business unit leaders, IT operations, and management to understand operational dependencies and potential impacts. 3. Develop a phased remediation plan. Explore options like temporary mitigation, staged rollout, or out-of-hours deployment. 4. Document the decision and rationale. Maintain a clear record of the chosen course of action and the reasoning behind it, including any accepted risks. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that, while several vulnerabilities have been identified across the network infrastructure, the primary concern is the potential for a sophisticated phishing attack to compromise user credentials, leading to unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. Given the limited resources for immediate remediation, which of the following strategies best addresses this critical risk? Option A. Implement multi-factor authentication for all user accounts and deploy advanced endpoint detection and response EDR solutions with enhanced behavioral analysis capabilities. Option B. Develop and enforce a new organizational policy mandating annual security awareness training for all employees. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive vulnerability scan of all network devices and prioritize patching based on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS scores. Option D. Focus on strengthening perimeter defenses by deploying additional firewalls and intrusion prevention systems without addressing user-centric vulnerabilities. Correct answer is A. Implement multi-factor authentication for all user accounts and deploy advanced endpoint detection and response (EDR) solutions with enhanced behavioral analysis capabilities. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a critical need to evaluate the effectiveness of existing security controls against identified threats. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not just identifying vulnerabilities, but also prioritizing remediation efforts based on their potential impact and likelihood, all within the context of the Checkpoint Certified Security Expert, CCSC 156-315. 77 exams implied regulatory framework, which emphasizes a proactive and risk-based approach to security. The core of the challenge lies in translating raw assessment data into actionable security improvements that align with business objectives and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified risks by proposing specific, actionable controls that are tailored to the threat landscape and the organization's risk appetite. This aligns with the principles of effective risk management, which advocate for a systematic process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks. By focusing on the most significant threats and vulnerabilities, resources are allocated efficiently, maximizing the return on security investments and ensuring compliance with the spirit of security regulations that mandate due diligence in protecting information assets. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on patching all identified vulnerabilities without considering their exploitability or impact represents a failure to prioritize effectively. This can lead to wasted resources on low-impact issues while critical risks remain unaddressed, potentially violating regulatory requirements for risk-based security. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing generic, high-level security policies without specific technical controls fails to provide concrete protection. This approach is insufficient because it lacks the detail necessary to effectively counter specific threats and may not meet the demonstrable due diligence expected by regulatory bodies. Finally, an approach that ignores the business impact of potential security incidents and focuses only on technical feasibility overlooks a fundamental aspect of risk assessment, which is to protect business operations. This can lead to the implementation of controls that are technically sound, but do not adequately safeguard the organization's critical functions, thus failing to meet the overarching goal of security. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the threat landscape and the organization's critical assets. This is followed by a systematic assessment of vulnerabilities and the potential impact of their exploitation. The next step involves evaluating existing controls and identifying gaps. Finally, remediation strategies should be developed and prioritized based on a clear understanding of the risk reduction achieved by each proposed control, ensuring alignment with business objectives and regulatory mandates. Question 12. The audit findings indicate several potential security vulnerabilities across the network infrastructure. Given the limited resources available for immediate remediation, which of the following approaches best aligns with a compliant and effective risk assessment strategy for prioritizing these findings? Option A. Immediately classify all identified vulnerabilities as high risk and initiate remediation efforts for every single finding concurrently. Option B. Disregard any vulnerabilities that do not present an immediate and quantifiable financial loss to the organization. Option C. Conduct a qualitative risk assessment using a recognized framework to determine the likelihood and impact of each finding, categorizing them into high, medium, and low risk levels for prioritization. Option D. Accept the risk scores provided by the security tool vendor without further internal analysis or contextualization. Correct answer is C. Conduct a qualitative risk assessment using a recognized framework to determine the likelihood and impact of each finding, categorizing them into high, medium, and low risk levels for prioritization. Explanation: scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity risk assessment, balancing the need for comprehensive analysis with the practical constraints of time and resources. Auditors often identify potential vulnerabilities, but the organization must prioritize remediation efforts. The professional challenge lies in determining the most effective and compliant method to assess the impact and likelihood of these identified risks, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with established security frameworks and regulatory expectations without becoming overly burdensome or neglecting critical threats. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a qualitative risk assessment methodology that leverages established frameworks like NIST SB 800-30. This method is best professional practice because it provides a structured, repeatable process for evaluating risks based on their likelihood and impact, allowing for prioritization without requiring extensive quantitative data that may be unavailable or impractical to obtain. It directly supports compliance with general security, best practices, and regulatory expectations for risk management by ensuring a systematic evaluation of threats and vulnerabilities. This approach is efficient and effective for most organizations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately escalating all identified findings to the highest risk category without further analysis. This is professionally unacceptable as it leads to resource misallocation, overwhelming security teams with low priority issues, and potentially delaying the mitigation of genuinely critical threats. It fails to demonstrate due diligence in risk assessment and can be seen as a procedural shortcut rather than a risk-based decision. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss findings that lack immediate, quantifiable financial impact. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Cybersecurity risks are not solely defined by direct financial loss. They can encompass reputational damage, operational disruption, legal liabilities, and data privacy violations. Ignoring these broader impacts demonstrates a lack of understanding of comprehensive risk management and can lead to severe non-compliance with data protection regulations and industry standards. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor-provided risk scores without independent verification or contextualization. While vendor scores can be a starting point, they often lack the specific context of the organization's environment, threat landscape, and business objectives. This approach abdicates the organization's responsibility for its own risk assessment, potentially leading to misprioritization and a failure to address unique organizational risks, which is a breach of professional duty and regulatory expectation for due diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a phased approach to risk assessment. First, understand the context of the organization and its regulatory obligations. Second, utilize a recognized risk assessment framework, e.g., NIST SB 800-30, to categorize and evaluate identified risks based on likelihood and impact. Third, prioritize risks based on this assessment, considering both qualitative and, where feasible, quantitative factors. Finally, document the entire process, including the rationale for prioritization, to demonstrate compliance and provide a clear audit trail. This systematic and context-aware approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively and that the organization addresses its most significant risks in a compliant and professional manner. Question 13. System analysis indicates a critical vulnerability has been identified within a core application that supports daily financial transactions. The immediate patch provided by the vendor is known to cause compatibility issues with several other critical business systems, potentially leading to significant downtime if deployed without careful planning. The security team needs to decide on the best course of action to mitigate this risk. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk and impact assessment. Develop a phased remediation plan that includes testing in a staging environment and communication with affected business units, and schedule the deployment during a low-impact period with a rollback strategy. Option B. Implement a temporary, undocumented workaround to block the exploit vector while awaiting a more stable patch from the vendor. Option C. Immediately deploy the vendor patch to address the critical vulnerability, accepting the risk of potential operational disruption. Option D. Escalate the issue to senior management and request a temporary shutdown of the affected application until a more stable solution can be found. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk and impact assessment. Develop a phased remediation plan that includes testing in a staging environment and communication with affected business units, and schedule the deployment during a low-impact period with a rollback strategy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a business. The security team has identified a critical vulnerability, but implementing the immediate fix could disrupt essential business functions. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that mitigates risk effectively without causing undue harm to the organization's operations, all while adhering to regulatory compliance. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment, impact analysis, and the ability to communicate technical findings to non-technical stakeholders. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a phased approach to remediation. This begins with a thorough risk assessment to understand the exploitability and potential impact of the vulnerability. Following this, a detailed impact analysis of the proposed security control is crucial to identify specific business processes that might be affected. Based on these analyses, a remediation plan is developed that prioritizes the most critical risks and outlines a staged implementation. This plan should include communication with affected business units, testing of the proposed solution in a controlled environment, and a rollback strategy. This approach aligns with best practices for incident response and vulnerability management, ensuring that security measures are implemented effectively and efficiently while minimizing disruption. It also implicitly supports regulatory requirements for due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the security patch immediately without any prior assessment or planning is a failure to conduct a proper impact analysis. This could lead to significant, unforeseen operational disruptions, potentially violating service-level agreements or causing financial losses. It demonstrates a lack of professional judgment in balancing security needs with business continuity. Ignoring the vulnerability because of potential operational disruption is a direct failure to address a known security risk. This exposes the organization to significant potential damage, including data breaches, reputational harm, and regulatory penalties. It represents a dereliction of the security professional's duty to protect the organization's assets. Implementing a workaround that is not fully tested or documented is also professionally unsound. While it might seem like a compromise, an untested workaround could introduce new vulnerabilities or fail to adequately mitigate the original risk. This approach lacks the rigor required for effective security management and could lead to further complications. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the threat landscape and the organization's risk tolerance. When a vulnerability is identified, the first step is always to assess its severity and exploitability. This is followed by an analysis of the potential impact of both the vulnerability and any proposed remediation. Communication with relevant stakeholders, including business unit leaders, is paramount. A phased remediation plan, including testing and rollback procedures, should be developed collaboratively. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, risk-aware, and aligned with both security objectives and business imperatives. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that following a significant security incident, the incident response team has proposed a series of immediate technical fixes to restore affected services. However, there is a debate within the security department regarding the next steps. One faction advocates for deploying these fixes rapidly to minimize business downtime, while another emphasizes the need for a comprehensive post-incident review to identify the root cause and validate the effectiveness of all remediation actions before declaring the incident closed. Considering best practices in security operations and incident management, which approach is most professionally sound and why? Option A. Conduct a thorough post-incident review to identify the root cause, validate all remediation steps, and assess the incident response plan's effectiveness before declaring the incident closed. Option B. Accept the incident response team's initial assessment of the fixes and declare the incident closed once services are restored, assuming the immediate threat has been neutralized. Option C. Focus solely on restoring services as quickly as possible, with the understanding that a formal review will be conducted at a later, unspecified date if resources permit. Option D. Deploy the proposed technical fixes immediately to restore services, and defer any detailed root cause analysis or review of the incident response plan until after normal operations have resumed. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough post-incident review to identify the root cause, validate all remediation steps, and assess the incident response plan's effectiveness before declaring the incident closed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, where a security team must balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of robust security posture. The pressure to restore services quickly after a significant security incident can lead to shortcuts that compromise thoroughness. The professional challenge lies in resisting this pressure and adhering to established incident response protocols, even when faced with urgent business demands. The need for deep analysis of the incident's root cause and the effectiveness of implemented countermeasures is paramount to prevent recurrence and ensure compliance with security best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive post-incident review that meticulously documents the incident's timeline, impact, and the effectiveness of the response. This includes a thorough analysis of the root cause, validation of all remediation steps, and an assessment of whether the incident response plan was followed and if it needs updating. This aligns with best practices for continuous improvement in security operations and demonstrates a commitment to learning from security events. Such a detailed review is crucial for identifying systemic weaknesses, ensuring that security controls are adequate, and providing auditable evidence of due diligence, which is often a requirement for regulatory compliance and internal governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a quick fix without a detailed root cause analysis is professionally unacceptable because it fails to address the underlying vulnerabilities that allowed the incident to occur. This approach risks the same or a similar incident happening again, leading to further operational disruption and potential data breaches. It also bypasses the opportunity to learn and improve security defenses, which is a core tenet of effective security management. Accepting the incident response team's initial assessment without independent verification is also a failure. This can lead to an incomplete understanding of the incident's scope and impact, potentially leaving residual threats or misinterpreting the effectiveness of the countermeasures. Professional practice demands a critical and objective evaluation of incident response efforts, not blind acceptance. Focusing solely on restoring services without a subsequent review of security posture and lessons learned is a significant ethical and professional lapse. It prioritizes short-term operational goals over long-term security resilience and risk mitigation. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility of a security team to proactively enhance defenses and prevent future incidents, thereby failing to uphold the duty of care to protect organizational assets and data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach post-incident activities with a structured methodology that prioritizes thoroughness and learning. This involves 1. Incident documentation and analysis. Ensure all aspects of the incident are meticulously recorded, from initial detection to final resolution. Conduct a deep dive into the root cause, not just the symptoms. 2. Remediation validation. Verify that all implemented fixes are effective and have not introduced new vulnerabilities. 3. Process review. Evaluate the incident response plan itself. Was it followed? Was it adequate? What improvements are needed? 4. Lessons learned and improvement. Translate findings into actionable improvements for security policies, procedures, technologies, and training. 5. Stakeholder communication. Report findings and recommendations clearly to relevant stakeholders, emphasizing the business impact and proposed mitigation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that incidents are not just resolved, but also serve as catalysts for strengthening the overall security posture. Question 15. Process analysis reveals a critical security incident has been detected within the organization's network, impacting several key servers. The immediate business pressure is to restore services as quickly as possible. The security team is tasked with determining the most effective and compliant course of action. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for handling such a security incident? Option A. Immediately restore affected servers from the most recent clean backups, prioritizing rapid service restoration over detailed forensic analysis. Option B. Contain the intrusion by isolating affected systems. Conduct a thorough forensic investigation to identify the root cause and scope, eradicate the threat, and then proceed with a phased recovery of services. Option C. Isolate the compromised servers, but focus efforts on bringing non-affected services back online, while deferring a full investigation of the compromised systems until after business hours. Option D. Disconnect all network-connected systems from the internet to prevent further spread. Then begin a manual review of all system logs to identify the source of the intrusion. The correct answer is A. Immediately restore affected servers from the most recent clean backups, prioritizing rapid service restoration over detailed forensic analysis. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, where a security team must balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of robust security posture. The pressure to restore services quickly after a detected intrusion can lead to rushed decisions that might overlook critical forensic steps or introduce new vulnerabilities. The professional challenge lies in adhering to established incident response protocols and regulatory requirements while managing stakeholder expectations for rapid resolution. The Checkpoint Certified Security Expert (CCSE) certification implies a need to understand and apply these principles within a defined regulatory context, which for this exam is assumed to be a framework that emphasizes data protection, breach notification, and due diligence in security incident management. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes containment, eradication, and recovery in a structured manner, ensuring that evidence is preserved and the root cause is addressed before full restoration. This aligns with best practices in incident response, such as those outlined in NIST SB 800-61 Revision 2, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, which emphasizes the importance of evidence preservation and thorough analysis. From a regulatory perspective, this methodical approach helps demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive data and fulfilling obligations under data privacy laws, e.g., if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, such as GDPR or CCPA, though for this exam we strictly adhere to the implied framework for 156-315. 77. Preserving evidence is crucial for post-incident analysis, potential legal proceedings, and understanding the attack vector to prevent recurrence. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately restoring systems from backups without a thorough investigation. This fails to address the root cause of the intrusion, leaving the organization vulnerable to reinfection or further exploitation. It also risks corrupting or overriding critical forensic evidence, hindering any subsequent investigation or compliance audit. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to follow established incident response procedures, potentially violating regulatory requirements for incident handling and breach mitigation. Another incorrect approach is to isolate affected systems but delay comprehensive analysis and eradication, focusing solely on restoring non-affected services. While partial restoration might seem efficient, it leaves the organization in a state of partial compromise. The undetected threat on isolated systems could spread or be reactivated, and the delay in addressing the core issue prolongs the overall risk exposure. This approach neglects the critical step of eradication and can be seen as a failure to act decisively to protect the organization's assets and data. A third incorrect approach is to immediately disconnect all systems from the network without a clear containment strategy or understanding of the scope. While drastic, this can cripple business operations unnecessarily and may not be the most effective way to contain a sophisticated threat. Without a phased approach, it can lead to panic and a lack of coordinated response, potentially missing critical indicators or allowing the threat to adapt. This can also be interpreted as an overreaction that fails to demonstrate a balanced and professional incident response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach security incidents with a structured, evidence-based methodology. The decision-making process should involve 1. Initial assessment and identification of the incident, 2. Containment to prevent further damage, 3. Eradication of the threat, 4. Recovery of affected systems and services, 5. Post-incident analysis and lessons learned. This framework ensures that all critical steps are taken, regulatory compliance is maintained, and the organization's security posture is strengthened. In situations of pressure, it is vital to rely on established protocols and seek guidance from incident response plans rather than making ad hoc decisions. Question 16. To address the challenge of an urgent, critical system outage requiring immediate troubleshooting by a senior engineer who is not typically granted such extensive access, which of the following actions best aligns with security best practices and regulatory expectations for maintaining system integrity and data confidentiality? Option A. Instruct the engineer to wait for the standard multi-day access request and approval process to be completed before commencing any troubleshooting activities. Option B. Authorize the engineer to access all systems and data based on their seniority and stated expertise, without implementing any specific access controls or time limitations. Option C. Provide the engineer with full administrative credentials to the entire server infrastructure for the duration of the troubleshooting period to ensure they have all necessary permissions. Option D. Grant the engineer temporary, role-based administrative access to only the affected systems and services, with a defined expiration time, and ensure all actions are logged. The correct answer is D. Grant the engineer temporary, role-based administrative access to only the affected systems and services, with a defined expiration time, and ensure all actions are logged. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a critical business function. Core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying the principles of least privilege and access control in a dynamic environment where immediate access might seem necessary for business continuity. The Checkpoint Certified Security Expert (CCSE) certification, particularly within the context of 156-315. 77, emphasizes a deep understanding of security best practices and their practical implementation, often guided by industry standards and regulatory expectations that prioritize data protection and system integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the fundamental security principle of least privilege, ensuring that access is granted only to the minimum necessary resources and for the shortest duration required. This minimizes the attack surface and reduces the potential impact of a compromised account. Furthermore, it aligns with the spirit of regulatory frameworks that mandate strong access controls and audit trails to prevent unauthorized access and data breaches. Implementing a temporary, role-based access grant with strict oversight and automated revocation directly addresses the immediate need while maintaining a high level of security and compliance. An incorrect approach that involves granting broad, persistent administrative access to the entire server infrastructure for troubleshooting purposes is professionally unacceptable. This violates the principle of least privilege, creating an unnecessary and significant security risk. Such an action would likely contravene regulatory requirements that mandate granular access controls and segregation of duties, increasing the likelihood of accidental or malicious data exposure or system compromise. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay troubleshooting until a formal, lengthy access request process is completed, is also professionally problematic. While adherence to process is important, an overly rigid and slow process can lead to significant business disruption and potential financial losses, which can also have indirect regulatory implications if service-level agreements are breached. However, the primary failure here is not a direct security violation, but a failure to balance security with operational needs effectively, potentially leading to business impact that could be scrutinized. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on the individual's stated expertise and grant them unfettered access without any form of verification or time limitation, is a critical failure. This bypasses essential security controls and audit mechanisms. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established security protocols, leaving the organization vulnerable to insider threats or accidental misconfiguration. This directly undermines the principles of accountability and transparency expected in secure environments. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a rapid risk assessment. This includes understanding the urgency of the business need, the potential impact of the issue, and the inherent risks associated with granting access. The goal is to find the most secure path that still allows for timely resolution. This often involves leveraging existing security tools and policies to implement temporary, monitored, and auditable access, rather than resorting to broad, unchecked permissions. Collaboration with security operations and compliance teams is crucial to ensure that any access granted is documented and justifiable. Question 17. Comparative studies suggest that organizations often struggle to align their cybersecurity investments with their actual risk exposure and regulatory obligations. Considering the Checkpoint Certified Security Expert (CCSE), exams focus on practical security implementation and best practices within a defined regulatory framework. Which of the following approaches to evaluating and implementing security controls is most professionally sound and compliant? Option A. implementing a baseline set of security controls that are commonly accepted as industry best practices, without a detailed analysis of the organization's specific threat landscape or regulatory obligations, to ensure a foundational level of security. Option B, focusing primarily on minimizing the budget allocated to cybersecurity by selecting the least expensive security solutions available, with the assumption that cost efficiency is the primary driver for effective security. Option C, conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to identify critical assets, potential threats, and vulnerabilities, and then selecting and implementing security controls that directly mitigate the highest priority risks, ensuring alignment with relevant regulatory requirements. Option D, prioritizing the adoption of the latest security technologies and features, assuming that cutting-edge solutions inherently provide the highest level of protection and meet all regulatory mandates. The correct answer is D, prioritizing the adoption of the latest security technologies and features, assuming that cutting-edge solutions inherently provide the highest level of protection and meet all regulatory mandates. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational realities of a business. The professional must evaluate different security strategies not just on their technical efficacy, but also on their alignment with organizational goals, risk appetite, and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in identifying the approach that offers the most effective and compliant security posture without unduly hindering legitimate business operations or incurring disproportionate costs. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based methodology, which is a cornerstone of effective information security management and is often mandated or strongly implied by regulatory frameworks. This involves understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, the value of its assets, and the potential impact of security incidents. By focusing on controls that directly address the most significant risks, resources are allocated efficiently, and compliance objectives are met in a targeted manner. This aligns with the principle of proportionality in security, ensuring that security measures are commensurate with the risks they are intended to mitigate. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the most advanced or comprehensive security technologies without a corresponding risk assessment fails to meet professional standards. This can lead to misallocation of resources, complexity that introduces new vulnerabilities, and potential noncompliance if critical risks are overlooked in favor of less impactful ones. Such an approach may also violate the principle of due diligence, as it doesn't demonstrate a reasoned and documented process for selecting security controls. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost savings above all else, is ethically and professionally unsound. Security is not merely a cost center but a critical business enabler and a responsibility to protect data and systems. Undermining security to reduce expenditure can expose the organization to significant financial, reputational, and legal damage, potentially leading to regulatory penalties. This demonstrates a failure to understand the fundamental role of security in business continuity and risk management. A third incorrect approach, which relies on outdated or generic security best practices without considering the specific context of the organization, is also professionally deficient. Security environments are dynamic, and what was effective yesterday may not be today. A static, one-size-fits-all approach ignores the evolving threat landscape and the unique vulnerabilities of the organization, leading to a false sense of security and potential compliance gaps. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying assets, threats, and vulnerabilities, analyzing the likelihood and impact of potential incidents, and evaluating existing controls. Based on this assessment, security objectives should be defined, and appropriate controls selected, prioritized, and implemented. Regular review and adaptation of the security strategy are crucial to maintain effectiveness and compliance. This iterative process ensures that security investments are aligned with business objectives and regulatory requirements, fostering a resilient and secure environment. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows a tendency to prioritize the sheer volume of deployed security solutions over their demonstrated effectiveness in mitigating specific, identified risks within the organization's operational environment. Option A. Conduct informal peer reviews among security team members to gather subjective opinions on the perceived strength of the current security infrastructure. Option B. Rely on vendor-provided statistics and marketing materials to gauge the efficacy of implemented security technologies. Option C. Quantify the number of security alerts generated by all deployed tools over a defined period, using this as the primary metric for evaluation. Option D. Assess the effectiveness of each security control against defined risk scenarios and organizational security objectives, ensuring alignment with regulatory expectations for security posture. The correct answer is D. Assess the effectiveness of each security control against defined risk scenarios and organizational security objectives, ensuring alignment with regulatory expectations for security posture. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for robust security posture with the practical realities of resource allocation and operational impact. The core difficulty lies in determining the most effective and compliant method for evaluating security controls when faced with diverse and potentially conflicting requirements. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen evaluation methodology not only meets technical efficacy, but also adheres to the specific regulatory framework governing Check Point certified security experts, which implicitly includes best practices for information security management. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, risk-based evaluation that directly maps to the organization's security objectives and regulatory obligations. This methodology ensures that security investments are aligned with identified threats and vulnerabilities, and that compliance is not merely a checklist exercise, but an integrated part of the security program. By focusing on the effectiveness of controls in mitigating specific risks, it demonstrates due diligence and a proactive stance towards security, which is a cornerstone of professional responsibility within the cybersecurity domain. This aligns with the implicit requirements of maintaining a secure environment as expected of a certified expert. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of security tools deployed, without assessing their actual effectiveness or alignment with risk, fails to meet professional standards. This is because it prioritizes quantity over quality and can lead to a false sense of security. Such an approach might overlook critical vulnerabilities that are not adequately addressed by the deployed tools, or, conversely, lead to the misallocation of resources on redundant or ineffective solutions. This can result in non-compliance with implicit security best practices and potentially regulatory requirements if specific security outcomes are mandated. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals, without a structured evaluation, is professionally unacceptable. This method is subjective, prone to bias, and lacks the rigor necessary for a reliable assessment of security controls. It fails to provide objective data for decision-making and can lead to significant gaps in security coverage. This approach demonstrates a lack of systematic thinking and a failure to apply established evaluation principles, which are expected of a certified professional. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes the latest security technologies without considering their integration into the existing environment or their relevance to the organization's specific risks is also flawed. While innovation is important, the adoption of new technologies must be driven by a clear understanding of their benefits in addressing identified risks and their compatibility with current infrastructure. Without this, organizations can incur significant costs for technologies that offer little practical security improvement or even introduce new vulnerabilities. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to conduct proper due diligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's risk appetite, security objectives, and the applicable regulatory landscape. Professionals should adopt a structured, evidence-based approach to evaluation, utilizing frameworks that allow for objective measurement of control effectiveness. This includes defining clear metrics, conducting regular assessments, and using the results to inform ongoing security strategy and resource allocation. The focus should always be on achieving demonstrable security outcomes that align with business needs and compliance requirements. Question 19. To address the challenge of selecting a new intrusion prevention system that aligns with Check Point certified security expert best practices and regulatory compliance, which evaluation approach best demonstrates professional due diligence? Option A. Rely on marketing materials and testimonials from the vendor to gauge the solution's overall effectiveness and suitability. Option B. Select the solution that offers the most advanced, cutting-edge features, regardless of its impact on system performance or user experience. Option C. Prioritize the solution with the lowest upfront purchase price, assuming all solutions meet basic functional requirements. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the solution's technical architecture, its alignment with industry-standard security frameworks, its documented effectiveness in mitigating known threats, and its ability to integrate seamlessly with existing security operations and reporting mechanisms. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the solution with the lowest upfront purchase price, assuming all solutions meet basic functional requirements. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of a business. Specifically, it involves evaluating the effectiveness of a security solution against established best practices and regulatory expectations, without resorting to purely quantitative metrics. The professional challenge lies in making an informed judgment based on qualitative factors, understanding the potential impact of security decisions on business continuity, and aligning these decisions with the organization's risk appetite and compliance obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic evaluation that considers multiple facets of security effectiveness, beyond simple performance metrics. This includes assessing the solution's alignment with industry best practices, its ability to address identified vulnerabilities, its integration with existing security infrastructure, and its adherence to relevant regulatory frameworks. This comprehensive review ensures that the chosen solution not only meets technical requirements, but also contributes to the overall security posture and compliance of the organization, thereby mitigating risks effectively. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a thorough security assessment fails to meet regulatory and ethical obligations. Organizations have a duty of care to protect sensitive data and systems, and prioritizing cost over security can lead to significant breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage, all of which can have severe regulatory consequences. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or vendor claims without independent verification is professionally unsound. This can lead to the adoption of ineffective solutions, leaving the organization exposed to threats and non-compliant with regulations that mandate due diligence in security investments. A third incorrect approach that overlooks the potential impact on user productivity and operational workflows, while seemingly security-focused, can lead to user workarounds that bypass security controls, ultimately undermining the intended security benefits and potentially creating new vulnerabilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the security objectives and the threat landscape. This should be followed by a thorough evaluation of potential solutions against established best practices and relevant regulatory requirements. The assessment should include both qualitative and quantitative factors, considering the solution's technical capabilities, operational impact, vendor support, and total cost of ownership. Finally, a risk-based approach should guide the decision, ensuring that the chosen solution effectively mitigates identified risks within the organization's acceptable risk tolerance. Question 20. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in the volume of security alerts, with a substantial portion being flagged as low priority or informational. The security operations team is experiencing alert fatigue, making it challenging to identify genuine threats amidst the noise. What is the most effective approach to address this situation while ensuring compliance with robust security practices? Option A. Increase the alert thresholds across all monitoring rules to reduce the overall number of alerts generated, assuming that fewer alerts will lead to better focus. Option B. Implement a comprehensive alert correlation and tuning process, leveraging threat intelligence and contextual information specific to the organization's environment to prioritize high-fidelity alerts and reduce false positives. Option C. Manually dismiss a predetermined percentage of low-priority alerts daily without further investigation to clear the backlog. Option D. Rely solely on external threat intelligence feeds to automatically categorize and prioritize all incoming alerts, assuming these feeds accurately reflect the organization's risk. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive alert correlation and tuning process, leveraging threat intelligence and contextual information specific to the organization's environment to prioritize high-fidelity alerts and reduce false positives. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for continuous security monitoring with the potential for generating excessive, low-fidelity alerts. The professional challenge lies in discerning genuine threats from noise, which directly impacts resource allocation, incident response effectiveness, and ultimately, the organization's security posture. Misinterpreting or ignoring alerts due to alert fatigue can lead to missed critical incidents, while overreacting to false positives wastes valuable time and resources. The pressure to maintain a high level of vigilance without succumbing to operational inefficiency necessitates a nuanced and data-driven approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of alert tuning and correlation, grounded in the principles of effective security operations and compliance with relevant security frameworks. This approach prioritizes the analysis of alert patterns and the establishment of correlation rules to identify genuine threats. By focusing on contextualizing alerts within broader attack vectors and understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, security analysts can significantly reduce false positives and prioritize high-fidelity alerts. This aligns with best practices for security information and event management, SIEM systems, which are designed to aggregate and analyze security data to detect and respond to threats. The regulatory expectation, while not explicitly detailed in the prompt's limited scope, implicitly requires organizations to implement effective security controls and monitoring mechanisms that are proportionate to their risk profile. A tuned and correlated alert system demonstrates a commitment to proactive threat detection and efficient incident response, which are foundational to many cybersecurity compliance mandates. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply increase the volume of alerts generated by the monitoring system without any refinement. This exacerbates alert fatigue, leading to a higher probability of genuine threats being overlooked amidst the noise. Ethically and professionally, this demonstrates a lack of understanding of effective security operations and a failure to implement controls that are both effective and efficient. It can be seen as a superficial response to a complex problem, potentially violating an implicit duty to manage security resources responsibly. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss a significant percentage of alerts as noise without a structured process for validation or tuning. This is a reactive and potentially dangerous strategy. It risks ignoring legitimate security events that might initially appear as anomalies, but are, in fact, indicators of compromise. This approach fails to meet the professional standard of due diligence in security monitoring and could lead to regulatory noncompliance if a significant incident is missed due to this arbitrary dismissal. It also represents a failure to learn from the monitoring system's output and improve its effectiveness. A third incorrect approach is to solely rely on automated threat intelligence feeds to dictate alert severity without considering the organization's specific environment and context. While threat intelligence is crucial, it must be integrated with internal telemetry. Without this integration, the system may generate alerts for threats that are not relevant to the organization or fail to detect threats that are specific to its unique attack surface. This demonstrates a lack of tailored security strategy and can lead to both false positives and false negatives, undermining the overall security posture and potentially failing to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements for effective risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach alert management by first understanding the organization's critical assets and potential threat vectors. This understanding informs the configuration of monitoring tools. The process should involve establishing baseline behaviors, defining what constitutes anomalous activity, and then implementing correlation rules that link related events. Regular review and tuning of alert rules based on incident response data and threat landscape changes are essential. When faced with a high volume of alerts, the decision-making process should prioritize investigation based on the potential impact and likelihood of a genuine threat. Using a structured incident response framework, this iterative process of monitoring, analysis, tuning, and response ensures that security resources are focused on the most critical issues, thereby maximizing effectiveness and demonstrating professional diligence.